Hey everybody, it's Randy Ray, and this is the Literate Texan, and I'm making a video I've been planning for 2 years now. When I first got started on BookTube, someone left a comment that they were interested in learning to read Shakespeare, and they hadn't had any luck with it. They'd studied it a little bit in high school, didn't like it, but they really wished that someone would explain it to them in a way that they could appreciate it and enjoy it. And I thought, man, maybe I could do that. And so this is my video, how to start reading Shakespeare and actually enjoy it. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to what most people do when it comes to learning how to read Shakespeare. Okay, most people, when they're explaining how to, I went to several people to ask for advice about how to go about this video. And most of them wanted to talk about which play to start with, okay? And everybody wants to start with their favorite play. Forgive me, I've got dry mouth today because of my medication, so I'll be hydrating throughout the video. But I'll try not to slurp, Steve. So, but yeah, most people try to steer you towards their favorite play, and a lot of people have, a lot of your Shakespeare aficionados have different favorites. Some people like Hamlet, some people like Macbeth, some people like Romeo and Juliet. I'm a comedy guy. I think starting off with something like Much Ado About Nothing's a great way to get started with Shakespeare. But I also think starting with the plays is really hard because you got to keep up with multiple characters. You've got a plot that you have to keep up with. And if you don't have a teacher or something like that, the language is going to be really unfamiliar to you because it's not Old English, but it is Elizabethan English. These plays were written in the late 1500s and early 1600s. So, that's been almost 500 years ago. So, there is a significant difference in the language and the pronunciations and stuff. So part of learning to appreciate Shakespeare is just acclimatizing yourself to the differences in the language. And that just comes with experience. But I contend that there's a better way to go about that experience. And this is also part of the Lone Star Book Club. But the better way to go about that experience, rather than read the plays, is to start with the sonnets. Okay, there's 154 sonnets. They're 14-line poems, and they're each complete among themselves. Now, they do create a cycle. There is a story, but each sonnet stands on its own. You can read a sonnet by itself and not have to be familiar with the other sonnets to understand it. And most of the time you can intuit the meaning even if you don't understand all the words. In fact, one of the themes for this whole series of videos that I'm doing about Shakespeare's sonnets is that you get to throw away perfectionism. You don't have to understand every word of every line. And, if you stress out about trying to understand every word of every line, you're going to have a lot more trouble learning to appreciate Shakespeare than you would otherwise. So, but anyway, I've got some notes here on the screen in front of me that I'm looking at. There were some other things I wanted to say about the sonnets. So, they're short. 14 lines isn't long, okay? Here's what a sonnet looks like right here. Okay, that's it. That's the whole thing right there. So 14 lines. There's 10 syllables in each line. So, they're written in iambic pentameter. I'm going to make another video that goes into more details about sonnets later. But also, besides the fact that they're mercifully short, they're also really intense emotionally. Almost all of them are extremely intense, and they're beautifully written. But the other thing is that they're all kind of unsettling. Almost all of them. Almost all of them leave you thinking, huh, or that's weird, or something like that. But I'm going to suggest, and I like to say this is for the Lone Star Book Club, we do things on a monthly basis. We read a book on a month. But I'm going to suggest that you try to make the sonnets, Shakespeare sonnets, part of your life for the next 6 months or so. So just read one sonnet a day or 2 sonnets a day max. Now, this isn't school. This isn't homework. It's just a suggestion. But poems are meant to be savored. And the sonnets especially should be savored. And I want you to get in the habit of reading them and rereading them. There are a couple of things I'm going to suggest that you do. One of them is, when you read a sonnet, give it a grade. A, B, C, D, F, depending on how much you like it. If it's excellent, give it an A. If you hate it and it's a failure, give it an F. And then read these with the idea of creating a list of your top 10 favorite sonnets. And if you're reading with that kind of intention, you'll pay more attention to what you're reading, which is why I suggest that. So, but anyway, if you're curious about Shakespeare, but you're not sure where to begin, maybe you read a play or 2 in high school. Most of us did. Most of us didn't understand it or didn't like it. Some of us have even seen a movie or a performance and didn't get much out of that. But if you really want to sit down and get into Shakespeare, like I say, I'm going to suggest that you start with the sonnets in our book club. And so that's what we're going to do today. So also, just lay a couple of lines of this on you here so you can see what I mean. Okay, this is from sonnet number 29. This is great. This is just the first 4 lines. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Now, who hadn't felt like that at some point? And one of the keys to unlocking this particular quatrain, these 4 lines, is understanding what the word bootless means. It means useless. It's pretty easy to figure out given the context, but yeah, you're crying to heaven and it's just useless. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, man, that's a bummer. You got nothing but bad luck and everybody else is mad at you too. So that's just a quick example of the kind of powerful language that you're looking at here. But let's see here. Anyway, my goal isn't to turn you into an academic. My goal isn't to turn you into a Shakespeare scholar. I'm not an academic. I'm not a Shakespeare scholar. I am an enthusiast, however. And I am a reader, and I am willing to slow down and listen to the sonnets, and I hope you will too. They're poems, so they're meant to be read out loud. Someone left a comment on one of my videos the other day that you don't have to read them out loud. No, you don't. You don't have to do anything. But my suggestion is that since they're poems because of how they sound, okay? So if you really want to read a poem, and it's a poem because of how it sounds, you should read it out loud, right? That just kind of makes sense to me. So anyway, most people do think of Shakespeare as a guy who wrote plays, and he was. He wrote 39 or 40 plays, at least, that we know of. And then, but the sonnets are a little more intimate than that. We're not even sure that Shakespeare wanted these published. And I'll get into more details about that in another video soon. But, one of the great things about the sonnets, like I say, you don't have to worry about stagecraft. You don't have to worry about keeping up with a bunch of characters or anything like that. There's a speaker. You don't even have to worry about whether or not the speaker actually represents Shakespeare or not. It's just the voice behind the poem, okay? It's the narrator. And you've got a series of thoughts and a series of emotions. And in many cases, you'll pick up on some obsessions throughout. And, it covers all kinds of subjects that we're all, as humans, concerned about: love, death, memory, time, jealousy, betrayal, friendship, lust. Lust is a big one. Art, immortality. And what's really great about it is, like I said earlier, you don't have to read all of them. Each sonnet stands by itself. And you don't have to know anything about Elizabethan history to decode it. These aren't written in code. They're written in English. So there's no 5-act plot. And it's really manageable. Reading a poem a day, or reading 2 poems a day, is really manageable. So, and they're meant to be reread. They're not meant to be read once and put away on a shelf. They're meant to be reread and memorized and recited. And we're going to try some of that. But I do have some suggestions about how to read the sonnets. I'm going to go into more detail about all these suggestions in a future video. This is just meant to be an introductory video. But the first suggestion, like I said, is try to read aloud. These were written with the intention of being spoken. And if you read it aloud, it's going to help unlock the rhythms and the emotions of the poems. Pay particular attention to the punctuation. Just because you come to an end of the line doesn't mean you're supposed to pause. You're supposed to pause when there's a comma. You're supposed to pause for a long time when there's a period. But if there's no comma or period at the end of the line, you just keep going. My second suggestion, don't get in a hurry. Like I say, 1 a day is plenty. 2's great too. If that's too much for you, and I can't imagine that it is because it's not time consuming, you can do 1 a week. So, and like I say, give up the whole perfectionism thing. Don't worry if you don't understand it completely. Some of them, don't worry about it if you don't understand them at all. Just try to feel whatever feelings you have in response to the language. The meaning will come through for you eventually, for all of them, if you keep at it. And I'm also going to suggest keeping a journal. You can write down your reactions to the sonnets in any way that you like. It's your sonnet journal. But you can write down favorite lines. You can write down that you were confused. You can write down questions. You can write down your reaction. You can talk back to the speaker of the sonnet. Just whatever you want to put in the journal. It's your journal. But it's going to make you, by writing about it, it's going to force you to think about it in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. So, and then the ones that really hit you, the ones where you think, oh, wow, that's amazing. Go back and reread those. Remember which ones those are, because, you might even try memorizing some of these. So, and I'm going to read that last sonnet aloud all the way through, the one that we were talking about before, 29, because I just think this one's wonderful. And it's one of the more famous ones too. But it goes, when in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I, all alone, beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings that I scorn to change my state with kings. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Okay? Because you don't think you can get much lower than he's talking about in those first 8 lines, but then he's talking about his friendship with whomever this is addressed to. And we don't have to worry about that at this point. And man, thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Wow, what a punchline, right? Anyway, I just love that. And that's just one of them, okay? And notice, it took me less than a minute to read that out loud. So, anyway, this is an entry point to Shakespeare's works for most people. I hope so anyway. If you're already familiar with Shakespeare, great. That's terrific. I know a lot of my viewers probably are already familiar with Shakespeare and don't need my help. But I hope you'll participate in reading the sonnets and talking about them with me anyway, because it's a lot of fun. But yeah. So not only are you reading poetry and learning about poetry while you're reading these, but you're also tuning your ear to Shakespeare's language, which is going to make the plays more understandable if and when you're ready to tackle them. There's a rhythm to the way that Shakespeare writes that it is not just in the sonnets, but it's also in the play. There's a certain amount of wit that he has, and then the topics and the themes of Shakespeare's sonnets are also repeated throughout the plays. And so, when you read Sonnet 29 there, like I just did, you'll hear echoes of that everywhere in Shakespeare. In practically every play at some point or another, if you decide to watch them or whatever. But you don't have to get in any kind of hurry. You don't have to feel any kind of pressure. Relax. Like I say, this isn't high school. You're not going to have to learn that soliloquy from Julius Caesar. Friends, Romans, countrymen. Don't worry about any of that nonsense. So the sonnets are their own complete experience. And even if you decide that you're never going to pursue the plays or the rest of Shakespeare, which I hope is not the case, I hope you will. But even if you decide not to pursue the plays of Shakespeare, the sonnets are complete unto themselves. You'll be enriched emotionally and spiritually and intellectually by reading, the complete sonnets. Okay. So, I'm going to talk about just a little bit about editions. I have this edition that I was holding up here. This is the Folger Shakespeare Library edition, which I really like because it has the sonnet on one page and then it has the notes on the other page. Okay, so the notes, you'll notice, are longer than the sonnet in most cases. My suggestion is to ignore the notes until you've read the sonnet 2 or 3 times. You'll be surprised at how much you understand without looking at the footnotes already. But that's the edition that I like. I've got another little edition here. It's more valuable just because it's pretty and it's got a really great detailed introduction. But I also understand that the Pelican edition of Shakespeare has a really great intro, really good notes, really clean layout. It's a really beautiful edition. There's also the Arden Shakespeare, which I believe is published in Britain. And it's a little dense. It's probably got deeper notes and explanatory stuff in it than the other ones. You can find the sonnets online, obviously being 500 years old. They are part of the public domain. You can find, during COVID, Patrick Stewart read not all the sonnets, but quite a few of them on YouTube. You can find videos of Patrick Stewart reading the sonnets. David Tennant has read all the sonnets, so that's something you can listen to. There are live readings of the sonnets on LibriVox too. And of course, if you follow my suggestions and advice, you'll read them out loud too. So, but yeah, keeping the journal is a good idea. We talked about that already. Like I say, I want you to build a relationship with these poems because that's what I'm doing, and I'm continuing my relationship, and I'm trying to share that relationship with you guys because one thing is I don't feel like I need to be monogamous when it comes to Shakespeare sonnets. So, and then let's talk about how to read a specific sonnet. And I'm not going to go into as much detail about this because I've got another video coming up. It's going to be even more specific. But the first step is to read it once and read it out loud. Don't stop. Just follow through as best you can. Don't worry if it's just gibberish to you. Just read it. Then during step 2, ask yourself, what kind of emotions is the speaker probably having? Is he angry? Is he upset? Is he desperate? Is he questioning something? Do you not know what his emotional temperature is? I always loved that Tom Waits album, Nighthawks at the Diner, because he talks about the emotional weather report. So definitely think about the emotional weather report when you're reading the sonnets. Step 3, find the argument. Okay, so every sonnet has a problem or a subject matter that it lays out in the first couple of quatrains, the first 8 lines or so. They're 14-line poems. Once it lays out that argument, there's usually something called a turn. It's called a volta, and we'll go into more detail about that. It's usually around line 9, where it spins the argument on its head. So it's like somebody throws in a but, or on the other hand, and then you get you another quatrain, and then you've got a punchline at the very end, which is a rhyming couplet. And you probably observed that when I read Sonnet 29 earlier. If not, go back and read it again, or just look for it when you read it, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about the rhyme schemes and stuff in my next video that goes into more detail about the sonnets. But then the next step, write something down in your journal. And you don't even have to keep like a journal. You could keep what they call a commonplace book, which is a kind of a journal that's specific. It's where you store quotes that you want to keep up with. And so, and then after you've written something down and you've read it once, read it again, but try to do something different with it this time. See if you can interpret it with a different set of emotions or something like that. And then, okay, revisit it later, much later. Okay. So, yeah, so there's my introduction to how to get started appreciating Shakespeare with the sonnets.